What's your favorite no way story? Story 1. My no way story is a more lighthearted one. My fiance, now husband, and I had talked about getting a pet. Growing up, I had only had cats. As an adult, I am highly allergic to them. So we decided a dog would be best. I had no idea if I would even like having a dog, since I had never even played with one. I read up on caring for dogs and was super stoked that our town was gonna have the annual pet expo soon. We went to it hoping to get some info about breeds, adoption, supplies, etc. The expo turned out to be pretty unhelpful, as most of the vendors were selling dog clothes and treats. As we were leaving, I noticed that there were a couple of booths on the outskirts of the expo that we missed. As we walked toward them, I saw that one had a couple of brownish dogs. The smaller of the two really caught my eye. He was just the most perfect puppy I had ever seen. He was brindled, and his fur looked like a brown tiger pelt. Long, graceful legs, a bit rough, and a sharp face and ears like a fox. His big brown eyes were full of intelligence. I talked to the woman running the booth and found out that they were a non-profit rescue organization run solely by volunteers. She informed us that only the larger of the two dogs was available for adoption. I petted the little guy for a bit and left, but I found myself thinking about him a lot over the next few weeks. I hoped I'd be able to find one like him when we were ready to adopt. I spent the next few months preparing to get a dog, renegotiating the lease to allow for a pet, getting supplies, researching foods, reading up on healthcare and first aid. Finally, we were ready to find a dog to adopt. We went to the Humane Society and struck out week after week. I just could not find a good match. None of the dogs felt like they would fit our little family. One day, after yet another disappointing day at the Humane Society, I was half-heartedly browsing Craigslist pet ads when I saw that there was an adoption event a few towns away. We went, expecting to be disappointed. Sure enough, the dogs at the event were not much better. Too energetic, too small, too big, too loud. I gave up and had started walking back to the car when a white van pulled into the parking lot. My husband said we should stick around just in case the van was bringing more dogs. Sure enough, the driver got out and let out a single little brown dog. I immediately started walking toward the van, parked about 100 feet away. My heart knew well before my brain could register that I recognized that dog as I walked faster and faster to the van. I remembered where I had seen him before. I shouted to my husband, "It's him! It's my dog!" It turns out that he was the dog from the expo, and the last of his litter to find a home. No one else wanted him because he was shy and looked unusual. I thought he was beautiful. Within the hour, he was buckled up in the back seat in his doggy seatbelt on his way to his new home. Okay, this was a lot more innocent than I expected, and honestly, brought a smile to my face. It's so great that OP was able to find the dog that she wanted, but I will say I've never heard of a doggy seatbelt before. Story 2. My roommate had a huge fish tank with 4 cichlids in it. One of them, the pink one, was really mean and used to pick on the other ones. I hated him. One night, I had a dream that I caught him with a net, threw him in a pan with some butter, fried him up, and ate him. The next morning, I walked by the fish tank, looked in to discover that the pink one was gone. I freaked out and looked all over the tank for him. He's nowhere to be found. When my roommate got home from work, I told him about my dream and that the pink cichlid is missing. He looked at me, visibly shaken, and said, "Dude, I'm gonna start locking my bedroom door at night." Days and weeks go by. I'm truly disturbed that I'm capable of sleep-eating my roommate's pets. Finally, I'm so overcome with anxiety that I decide to scour the tank, CSI style, looking for clues. I pressed my face against every square inch of the tank, desperate to salvage a shred of sanity. After what must have been at least an hour, something tiny catches my eye, under a large piece of coral in the back corner. I reached in and pulled out the coral, only to discover the bones of the pink cichlid. It had been wedged between the rocks and the coral on the bottom of the tank. Somehow the other 3 cichlids had murdered the pink one, and telepathically framed me for it. Not only did they frame me, but they also got me to confess. It seems like Opie wasn't the only one that hated that fish, given that the other 3 literally killed it. I can't imagine thinking that you somehow took sleepwalking to the next level and literally did a little fish fry in the middle of the night. I feel like that's something you would have to know happened, like seeing dirty dishes out, or I don't know, literally still tasting it. Story 3. More of a big coincidence than anything. First week of college, my junior year, sometime during the day one, I lose the dongle on my laptop charger. I look everywhere for it and can't find it anywhere. I got back to the room that night and my roommate asked how my day was. I tell him about losing the dongle and looking everywhere, and he gets this weird look on his face. He looks at me and says, "Was it black and about this long?" while holding his fingers apart. I tell him yes, but I figure he's just messing with me. He asked, "Did it have a yellow tip with a little white strip attached to it saying HP?" I tell him yes, but I still figure he's messing with me. He looks at me and says, "Dude, I'm so sorry, but when I was leaving the cafe this morning, I saw this little black thing on the sidewalk. I pick it up and start looking at it. For some reason, and I can't explain why I did it, but as I was passing the dumpster, I just blurted out, 'Sucks for this guy,' and threw it right in." He insisted he wasn't messing with me, so he put on some crappy clothes and went dumpster diving, only taking about 20 minutes to find it. Of the 2,000 plus students that attend my university, the person to find it and, like a douche, throw it away was my roommate. That's honestly so funny that the one person who happened to be a jerk was your roommate. But I guess it was also a blessing since he knew exactly where it was. It was super lucky though that the garbage people didn't come to clean out the dumpster. Story 4. A few years ago, I made plans to go see Nine Inch Nails in Massachusetts on their final tour, with a friend of mine along with his two friends. We're from New York. On the trip in, the MIA, the song Paper Planes comes on, and the three of us start singing along, making all the noises obnoxiously, which annoys the fourth guy, Shane. He tells us that he hates the song, which ended up being a bad idea, because my friend found and purchased the single for that song, complete with 5 remixes later that day. We headed into town a couple days early, so there was plenty of annoying Shane with the song, along with making jokes about how maybe if we asked nicely, Trent Reznor will play it at the concert. The day the concert comes, and as the opening act, Street Sweeper Social Club plays their set. The singer announced, "This next song isn't on our album," and launches into a cover of, you guessed it, Paper Planes. It took a few moments to sink in because I really couldn't believe that it was actually happening. It was too perfect. Here, we had been annoying him obnoxiously for the entire trip with this song, which the rest of us genuinely liked for the record, only to have the opening act of the concert play it out of nowhere. Story 5. One winter, I went sledding down a popular hill in my hometown with my brother and his wife. At the bottom of the hill, there's a frozen pond. My sister-in-law hopped on the back of my sled, sitting backwards, and we went down together. Due to the extra mass, we started going way faster than I expected. When I noticed we were heading right toward a little kid, I just couldn't maneuver out of the way, so I leaned forward and scooped the kid up, holding him up like Simba. Then I realized we were still about to sled into a frozen pond, so I bailed out and held the kid high over my head as I could. I stood up, set the kid down, and looked around for his parents. When I saw a big dude coming at me, I was like, oh crap, here we go. Then he got closer and I realized it was one of my closest friends, and that the kid I ran into was his son who I babysit regularly. I thought to myself, no way, and gave him a big hug. The kid said he thought it was awesome. Story 6. Here's mine. I was walking my older dog one night around 10 p.m. I had him off leash since it was late and we were in a neighborhood, no one to bother. I kept track of him for poo duty as he sniffed around and we were approaching an intersection. The house we were walking along was 20 feet from the sidewalk where I was and was edged by very large juniper bushes, which he was checking out. Suddenly, he stopped and dove into a bush. This was odd considering he was nearing 10 years old, and although he's active, he's not crazy like that. Note, he's a lab and husky mutt for reference. Out of the bush comes some sort of snarl or scream, and all I could think was, dang, he got a raccoon. And out leaps an immature mountain lion, at least 20% larger than my dog. It runs off down the road and I stand there, terrified, yelling, no way, as he comes back to me wagging like he's the greatest dog ever, which is very likely considering that cat was much bigger than me. It was probably his most well-earned rawhide bone he's ever earned. Honestly, OP, the dog might deserve the entire bag of rawhides, considering he saved your hide. Get what I did there? Sorry, obligatory dad joke for the day. But in all seriousness, it's amazing that even though your dog is getting older, he still took the time to protect you. Sounds like you guys have a special bond. Story 7. My mate's mom is a doctor who assisted on the following, which I thought was an urban myth. An 18-year-old guy was playing rugby league, and after a massive tackle, his hip cleanly dislocated. They called the paramedics to come, who arrived ridiculously fast, considering the injury, and proceeded to pop the hip back into place. The guy was screaming already from the pain of the dislocation, but when they popped it back in, he lost his mind. Totally. Screaming and wailing like nothing else that they had heard. As it turns out, in the process of the dislocation, a lot of the muscles around that general groin area had pulled, including the testicles. One of them had gotten caught in the hip joint when it popped back in. After they got him to the hospital, they diagnosed the issue and had to re-dislocate it to get it back out. Also, if anyone feels bad for the guy, he had run out on his then pregnant girlfriend about 3 weeks before. The dude deserved it. Story 8. Back in 2006, my brother and I were in Berlin just messing around when these two Russian girls asked out to us in Russian. Confused, we replied in English, nothing. Then in German, it turns out that they just wanted someone to take their picture. We oblige, then get talking and hang out for the rest of the day. After dinner, we say goodbye and part ways. Fast forward to 2010. I'm using Live Mocha to learn Russian, and out of boredom, I click the link to review English submissions. I find one of a girl practicing ordering food in a restaurant. I see the display picture and think, this girl's hot. Click her profile and I'm like, okay, this girl looks really familiar. I sent her a message and we started exchanging this and that. Wouldn't you know it, it's the same girl from Berlin. We got together over the summer in Holland and I think she's the one. Story 9. I made eye contact with a guy that looked nearly exactly like me, just slightly older. He claimed to be driving through the town because he's on a road trip with his friends from Hialeah, Florida. I told him I was born there and then adopted and moved to California. He was immediately curious about the implications of how this happened, and I told him my biological mother's name and that she was too young to take care of me, so she had me adopted. After he hears this, he pulls out a picture of his mother at her high school prom. I reach for my wallet, numb with incredulity as my fingers pull free the same exact picture of this young woman. We have the same mom. We're long lost brothers. It's like a real-life parent trap. I hope you guys had some time to reconnect and maybe get to see what similarities or differences you had, given you were raised by separate families. Story 10. When I was 17, I worked for an excavation and demolition company for the summer. We were gutting an old mill in New Hampshire to turn into high-end lofts. One of the workers was standing on the top of some scaffolding about 12 to 15 up using a handheld bandsaw to cut through a large pipe. As he was cutting, a strap supporting the pipe broke, letting it drop down and pinch the blade. This made the saw shoot back towards him and push him off the scaffold. This guy did a complete freaking backflip while holding a working saw from over 10 feet up. He landed on his feet, saw still running. Everyone stopped and stared at him for about 5 seconds before we went back to work. Story 11. My friend, John, is a paramedic and firefighter. He also teaches and certifies first aid and CPR. Now, for those that don't know, CPR is not very effective. It has a very low success rate, unless initiated soon after an incident, which is why everyone should learn CPR. Even after arrival, many people have serious health effects. One day, John gets into a pretty bad car accident and goes into cardiac arrest. The paramedics and police are dispatched. The officer, first on scene, knows CPR and initiates chest compression on John. John is revived and although suffered severe memory loss as well. The kicker, John taught the officer CPR the week prior to the incident. Story 12. My sister was driving down the street at 45 miles per hour with her windows open, and a deer ran into the street. Instead of hitting this deer, the deer jumped into her car through the window and landed with its head in the foot part of the passenger side seat and its butt on the headrest. The deer was freaked out and with its butt in the air proceeded to poop all over the car. She obviously pulled over. Several people stopped to help and ask her where the deer was. She just stood there screaming, "It's in the car! It's in the car!" A helpful man opened the door, pulled the deer out, and the deer bounded off like nothing happened. For imagery, she was driving a late 90s Ford Escort at the time. No one believes this story, but it is 100% true. I'm not quite sure how you would explain this to your insurance company, but I'm sure it was one hell of a story. Maybe you could point to the deer poop and be like, how the heck else do you think it got like that? Story 13. Once, waiting in a line at a restaurant, I saw the guy in front of me. I think I recognize him, but I don't know what. The entire time I am waiting, I am searching in my brain as to why I knew him. He turns to me and says, "Do I know you?" We both stood there for a good 10 minutes, going through high schools, workplaces, friends, etc. Anything to find out why we knew each other. As far as we could tell, though, there is no reason at all we should have ever met before. But we both clearly recognized each other. To this day, no clue. Story 14. A friend of an old roommate of mine was at the airport a few years ago and saw Bill Nye the Science Guy at the terminal next to his. Eventually, he got up the courage to talk to him, but it was nothing more than small chat and praise. Bill's plane gets called, so the kid leaves him be and sits back down trying to digest how cool his life just became. But a few minutes go by and all of a sudden, he hears his name called. Bill Nye is standing at the gate and calls out, "Hey kid, science rules," then boards the plane. Story 15. I'm positive this will get buried, but I felt like telling this anyway. While visiting family in Michigan for our family reunion a few years ago, I live in California, there was a KKK rally in the small town that we were staying in. Being a young black teenager, semi-flipping crap because there's an actual white supremacist rally going on. I decided to hole up in the grocery store, where coincidentally 6 other black people, most likely everyone of color in the town, were camping out as well. Story 16. My brother's friends are twins and are friends with the Bush twins. Makes for a cute photo op. Well, about 7 years ago, they were invited to their birthday party at the White House. It was a gag gift party. As they are going through the metal detectors, the Secret Service inspects the box with the presents, pulls out 2 giant black toys. They stare down my brother's friends while proceeding to burst out laughing. I still can't believe they went through it. The truly giant balls. I feel like this might not be the best way to get a former president to like you, but hey, I mean, if it worked, then more power to them, I suppose. Story 17. The day after I proposed to my wife, we were at the Science Fiction Museum in Seattle, Washington. There's an exhibit that is a giant tumbler full of yellow beads, like thousands of yellow beads, and 1 black one. It is meant to illustrate the unlikelihood of finding life in the universe. I call her over to tell her how cool it was, and she just pointed at it casually and said, "There's the black one." And she has continued to amaze me every day since. Good times. Story 18. When my mom was about 19 or 20, her and her twin sister were shopping in Lake City when they were approached by a man in a nice car. He asked if they wanted to get in and maybe have a drink. Ma said he was rather handsome, but they turned him down. Later that year, it was revealed on the news that the man that had approached them was Ted Bundy, and after they turned him down, he abducted and killed his last known Florida victim. Story 19. My girlfriend and I were traveling in Italy and met this nice Australian girl on the train from Rome to Naples. We chatted a bit and learned that she had just left her friend in North Africa to start traveling on her own. Fast forward 2 weeks and my girlfriend and I are now on a bus from Brasovno, Romania to Bucharest, and we ended up randomly meeting the Australian girl's friend that was left in North Africa. Story 20. Flying 1,100 miles for an interview. I hear someone across the aisle yell my name. I'm thinking, that voice sounds familiar. Turns out it was one of my good friends from college. I'm thinking, no way. He got an interview the same time I did. And we stayed next door at the same hotel the night before the interview. And now we're housemates. Both got the job. The end. This is such a cute story, knowing that you were able to reconnect and basically start your new lives together. Story 21. I was deployed in Iraq and was out on a convoy on December 31st, 2007. Long story short, I unknowingly pissed on an IED, which exploded 30 seconds after I walked away. This was on my birthday. Story 22. I was outside eating at a burger joint and Bill Murray came up and took a french fry. He told me, "No one will ever believe you." Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.